Have you ever watched the flight tracker on the back of an aeroplane seat and noticed the altitude hovering somewhere around 35 to 40,000 feet, no matter which airline, which aircraft, or which route you happen to be on? Modern jet engines are technically capable of operating efficiently at significantly higher altitudes. Thinner air at greater height means less drag and better fuel economy. And yet commercial aviation has settled, almost universally, on the same narrow altitude band. The limit is not really about the aircraft at all. It is about how long a human being stays conscious after the cabin loses pressure. Aircraft cabins are pressurized to simulate an altitude far lower than the aircraft is actually flying at, typically around 6,000 to 8,000 feet, because the human body cannot function in the genuinely thin air at cruising altitude. This pressurization depends entirely on the aircraft's structure and systems remaining intact. If a seal fails or structural damage breaches the fuselage, the cabin can lose that artificial pressure rapidly, and the available air reverts immediately to the true outside conditions. But here's the surprising truth. Aviation physiologists use a specific, carefully measured metric called time of useful consciousness to describe how long a person retains the mental clarity needed to act, put on an oxygen mask, follow an instruction before passing out from lack of oxygen. At an altitude of around 25,000 feet, that window is roughly 3 to 5 minutes, enough time for masks to deploy and for most passengers to use them correctly. At 40,000 feet, the same window collapses to somewhere between 15 and 20 seconds. At higher altitudes still, it drops to single digits. Think of it like the difference between falling into a swimming pool and falling into freezing open water. Both are dangerous, but one gives you minutes to orient yourself and respond, while the other gives you only the time it takes to gasp once before your body stops cooperating. The altitude ceiling commercial aviation operates within is calibrated specifically to keep that window survivable. Even in the worst-case failure scenario, regulators are required to plan for. So, if higher altitudes offer genuinely better fuel efficiency, why doesn't aviation simply improve the speed of emergency oxygen delivery instead of capping altitude at all? The answer, as is often the case in safety engineering, comes down to designing for the failure that happens despite every precaution, not the failure you expect to prevent. Oxygen masks deploy automatically and quickly, but deployment is not instantaneous, and not every passenger reacts immediately, particularly children, the elderly, or anyone asleep or disoriented at the moment of an emergency. Aviation regulators set maximum operating altitudes specifically so that even a worst-case combination of slow reaction and imperfect mask use still falls within a survivable time of useful consciousness, rather than designing equipment fast enough to compensate for a higher ceiling and betting every passenger uses it perfectly under panic. This is also why supersonic aircraft historically operating at much higher altitudes, such as Concorde, required additional engineering specifically to manage this risk, including reinforced windows and structural redundancy designed to make a sudden depressurization considerably less likely in the first place, rather than relying on passenger reaction time at an altitude where that time barely exists. So, the next time you glance at the altitude reading during a flight and notice it sitting in roughly the same narrow band it always does, you will know the number is not a limitation of the engines. It is a number chosen specifically so that if everything else fails, you still have a handful of seconds that are actually enough